Hi, in this module, we're going to be talking about punishment. Now, remember, the definition of punishment is anything that you do that decreases the frequency of a behavior. The thing with punishment is that a lot of research shows that what we think is a punishment is actually not very effective. In other words, it's something that we do to an individual with the goal of decreasing the behavior, but it doesn't actually decrease the behavior. This is true whether you think about things like suspension, where research shows that children who are suspended once are much more likely than the general population to be suspended in future years, or whether you're looking at something like incarceration, where research also shows that the recidivism rate, that is, the arrest rate and reincarceration of individuals after they've been released from prison, is extremely high. So, punishment is something that we do to an individual with the goal of decreasing a behavior. But if we really want to change that individual's behavior, we need to make sure that it's effective. And punishment often isn't. One specific or three specific types of punishment that we're going to be examining in this module are exclusion, seclusion, and restraint. Now, exclusion is sending an individual to a space to be by themselves. Timeout is a form of exclusion. Go sit in the corner, or go sit in the hallway, or go to the specific room and chill out, calm down. A little bit more restrictive than that is seclusion. In seclusion, the individual is also sent to be in a space by themselves, but in seclusion, they are physically prevented from leaving the space. In other words, in timeout or exclusion, you might tell the individual, you need to sit in that chair until I tell you to get up. But you are not physically holding them in that chair or blocking their ability to get up by holding a mat in front of them. With seclusion, you are. You may put them in a room by themselves and lock the door. You may put them in a room by themselves and hold the door shut. You may put them in that timeout chair, and every time they try to get up, you physically push them back down into the chair. You may take and hold a mat so that they are in an area and they're blocked by a mat from leaving that area. It doesn't matter how you accomplish keeping them in that space. If they are physically prevented from leaving the space where you have told them to go and where they are by themselves, it is seclusion. And then restraint is physically holding a person or physically preventing a person from moving. So if a child is trying to hit you and you hold their arm down, that could be restraint. If you think of like something like a straitjacket, that is restraint. It is a physical way to prevent that person from moving. So there aren't any federal laws regulating how exclusion, seclusion, and restraint are used, but there are often, or in some cases, and in Maryland specifically, there are state laws regulating their use. And so in Maryland, exclusion, seclusion, and restraints can all be used by schools under certain situations, specifically if there is an imminent safety concern. However, seclusion and restraint under Maryland law cannot be used with adults with developmental disabilities at all. So it's interesting how it can be used with children, but it can't be used with those same individuals once they become adults and leave school. But that's what Maryland law says. Different states have different laws. So the goal, if you look at the Maryland law, according to Maryland law, the goal of seclusion, exclusion, and restraint is really not punishment. It's not to prevent a behavior from reoccurring. It is strictly safety. It is to keep everybody safe in that moment of crisis. However, in actuality, seclusion, exclusion, restraint are usually used as punishments. They're used by people thinking that, well, if I hold this child for hitting, if I make this child sit in a timeout chair, if I take and lock this individual in a room for attacking the teacher, they are going to be less likely to do that behavior in the future. Unfortunately, Like with most punishment, research shows that's not the case. Research shows that exclusion, seclusion, and restraint are all very unsuccessful in preventing the behavior from reoccurring. And one of the articles that you'll be reading in this module talks about the research around the lack of effectiveness of these techniques. And that specifically is referring to lack of effectiveness in the use of these techniques as punishments, not in regards to their intended use under Maryland law, which is to keep everybody safe in that moment of crisis. To my knowledge, there has not been any wide scale study done on the effectiveness of seclusion, exclusion, and restraint in regards to that momentary safety. However, there are certainly lots of documented individual incidents of individuals being harmed through their use, and you will be reading about that in this module. So, in this module, learn a little bit more about punishment, about exclusion, seclusion, and restraint, and about their lack of effectiveness.